Lexigo presents The Native Experience with your host, Brian.
Oh, hello world. We are back. Wow, it's been a while. We took a little break in between episodes. A little bit of we'll call it a season break here. But we're back and ready for the next round of conversations, and I am so excited. This is Brian from Lexigo.com, and once again, you are listening to the Native Experience podcast. So we're going to be chatting with Edwin Trebels once again today. He graciously offered to come back on, and he is the translations director at Philadelphia Church of God, and he's working on a number of new and exciting projects, and I can't wait to discuss them with you because they are very valid and applicable to many of the things that you're working on. So we'll dive deeper into the processes, workflow, and implementation of these projects today. I think it's going to be of great interest to you. But thanks again for joining us, and thanks for hanging out with us as we're back for another round of interviews and conversations. And I am so excited to get in with Edwin today. Edwin, welcome back to the Native Experience. Thanks again for joining me. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks for having me on.
Well, it's good to have you back. And I had a great time talking with you last time, which I think was we took a little break. You know, we took we had the first season, and then we took a little bit of a couple months, break and all that. But now we're back rolling through a bunch new conversations and stuff. But you were on the last episode 25. So by the way, if you've not had a chance to listen to the first episode with Edwin, please do listen to that. And all of your bio and everything was on there, and everything that you do and stuff like that. So you can check that one out. But today I want to know what you're currently nerding out on, because it's been a couple months.
Right.
Things change, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Every day it changes. But I'm nerding out on Blackbird at the moment, blackbird.io, which is a workflow orchestration tool. So nice. It's exciting.
Cool. So, and we're going to dive into that. I know that because that actually does kind of take us into one of the first questions I have. So you'll have to get into what it does and all of the fun stuff like that. Because there are so many. It's amazing to me. Tell me if I'm crazy for thinking this, but I feel like there's just continuously new programs that keep coming out. And then you start to just go, okay, where do I start and where do I stop? If you know what I mean? Because it's easy for people like us that it's like, oh, use this and this and this and this. And all of a sudden you're going, what, hold on, too much.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think Nimsy mentioned that they have a catalog of 2,000 language technology pieces. So, yeah, over 2,000.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy. And, of course, everybody has their own spin on it, which is good. Find the fit for you. But how do you, I know this is a total side question, but how do you sift through 2,000 different technologies and decide, okay, this one's for me? That seems like a lot of time.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, you have to take it one step at a time, I think. You have to think of one single use case. You have to say, okay, this is what I'd like to accomplish. And then what might be a good way to do that? And then you can narrow down a bit. You kind of evaluate that particular component with a few companies, not too many probably. You kind of rely on peers as well. You kind of ask around, look at what's popular, what seems to be working for other people, reviews, because you do spend a lot of time on sale calls otherwise.
It's true. I know. I think about just all of the various tools literally the various tools for the various applications that you're trying to use. But even going to and I'm going to call this simpler because there's not 2,000 different, but I'm a musician. And so one of the things that I've been trying to learn is recording and composing software and stuff like that. But there's still a lot of options out there. And I did so much research, which ones are the best ones to use and that kind of thing. And, can you give me some different information on what they do? And what I was surprised about is how remarkably unhelpful most of the people were. Because it was like, well, you just got to pick whatever works best for you. I'm like, that doesn't help. I don't know. And then people were like, well, just try Ableton. Okay, well, Ableton was interesting, but that's not how my brain works. And so if people would talk about some of those nuances, for example, if you have a music engineering brain, then you should go with Ableton or Pro Tools, for example. That's kind of way I wish people would start talking about some of these different softwares is if you're like this, or if you're like this, or if you're like this would be helpful. And here's how it can benefit you. And which I know people do, but it's amazing how many people don't either. So that's why it's hard to sift through that.
Yeah, I do think there's a big opportunity for consultants because of that. There's some people that have been in the industry for a long time, and they're familiar with legacy tools. They're familiar with the steps that have led to the current moment, and therefore they have a very wide understanding of the tools, and what might differentiate them. So consultants definitely have a role to play within this massive boom of language technology. So yeah, there's a few people that have helped me out. They've been very generous with their time, and some were, just really kind. Partially because we're a nonprofit, so that's nice of them to support our efforts.
Yeah. That's great. Well, I feel like for the most part, people are really looking at tools like this to take some of the work off their plate, allow them to focus on the things that, really only they can focus on. It's there to assist them. It's there to make their life easier, not harder, not more complex and complicated and all of that. And so, being able to suggest tools that are actually able to check some of those boxes and offer those solutions and make their lives easier and all that. I mean, there's just so many factors in there. So, all right, let's dive into some of this because I'm excited. You're working on a lot of new things right now, and I want to dive into some of these projects. But let's start with the LangOps workflow and implementation and talk about that. I know this ties in with Blackbird and everything, so go for it.
All right. Yes. So LangOps is exciting for us because we can create a component based tech stack. So we can use a workflow orchestrator like Blackbird to tie all of these various components together. So Blackbird acts like the backbone of our workflow for a whole variety of our use cases, and then all these tools, they connect to Blackbird as an app and it's based off API typically. So there's an API connection with these tools, and then we can orchestrate various workflows. So there's a whole set of microservices that we are creating with Blackbird. And to just make that more practical, essentially, there's a few ways of doing this, and we are still experimenting a lot. We have something like 24 experiments running at the moment, all sorts of different use cases. And one of them is simply to have a hot folder such as Dropbox. You start with that, and you have a folder in the Dropbox where you simply put a file that ready for translation in that Dropbox in an input folder. And automatically then through the API, Blackbird is notified of that file. And then it triggers this set of events automatically. And for instance, an example of that is we put the file, an article, say a blog post, we put that into the input folder. It then it downloads the glossary that we have prepared for a target language. It imports that glossary into DeepL, translates the document through the DeepL API, and then it actually changes the file name because we would like it to have a different file name after it's been translated. It actually also adds the word count, and then it uploads the article back to an output folder in that same Dropbox folder.
Wow.
All within 15 seconds. So you have a machine translation of that file now within 15 seconds, which is very fast because even if you did that manually on DeepL Pro, which is, where you upload, you click around, you go to the website, you upload the document, you wait for a bit, you download it. That actually takes a few minutes. So if you did it a couple of thousand times, you're saving many daily and in a weekly basis. We're saving hours just with that simple workflow.
Yeah, that's true. You are saving hours. That's incredible. So just out of curiosity, do you know how many hours you're actually saving on this or how much money you're saving?
Well, that's one microservice that we've created. So there's several microservices that we are building out there. Some of them are Actually, they're almost all nearly done, and all combined, that's probably a savings of something like 40 hours we've calculated a week.
Wow.
So it's literally like a full-time job that is automated. Now, this person who is doing this job right now actually is going to help us with other work that we need to do. So It's not like we have less of a need for this person all of a sudden. We actually we can just they're being retrained actually, and they're doing other things, which is great because overall the output is much higher with that kind of savings.
That's great. Well, and you're keeping your person around too, which is great because a lot of times technology like this has a tendency to eliminate jobs, and that's not good. So I'm glad that you're actually continuing to keep the person, but retraining and, utilizing in a different area, which is amazing. This is one of those wonderful pieces of where technology really can come in and make a huge positive difference. I know a lot of conversation around, especially AI, machine learning and stuff. There's a lot of concern. There's some negativity, but this is one of those amazing situations where it's phenomenal. I mean, 15 seconds. That's just incredible. So tell me, tell me a little bit more about, the impact on what you're doing too. I mean, obviously there's the time and the money savings and stuff like that. But what kind of work are you doing when it comes to this, with the translation? What kind of specific work are you doing?
Yeah, well, so we produce lots of different media. So we have blog posts, many blog posts. We have an email newsletters of all different kinds within several different domains. So we have like a news domain, and we have an archaeology domain. We have a religion domain and a youth domain. So there's also various magazines that are associated with those blog posts that are that are more larger articles. And then there's also videos, so short videos, long videos, which is actually another tool that we're using synthetic voice to expand our reach in that kind of e-learning type content. Yeah. And there's other things too, of course, like social media and all kinds of marketing type content. So there's lots of things that we're involved in. A lot of it has to do with education, and a lot of it has to do with providing an educational service to all those various different domains. Like our archaeology, we actually have an institute, and they are involved with excavations and so on, and they're involved with. Like a different with Hebrew University, for instance, and they are excavating, but then they're also helping with reporting, and they're also basically providing a bridge between the academic world and non-academic folks who are interested in archaeology. So they're basically, our staff is sifting through a lot of these academic reports and then writing it up in language that is more readily understood.
Sure.
by regular folks like ourselves, rather than the academia, like heavy academic reports.
Gotcha. I know we all have our niche speak, or whatever you want to call it, niche speak or whatever, because my mom was a nurse, and so she'd always talk in the please translate to the common folk here, But so you're taking all of this information and then you're utilizing these technologies then to translate into various languages. Is that
yes?
Okay, and then how many languages?
We translate to 10 different target languages. So most of our content is originally, the source language would be English. Typically, there are some small exceptions where we are actually writing in a target language already. Okay, but for the most part, our source language is English, and then we go into 10 target languages.
Excellent. How accurate are the translations?
Well, we had a analysis done actually just recently by a very advanced company who specializes in this type of analysis, like a quality estimation. And they found out that when we use a generic model such as DeepL, they found out that on average, and this is an average over a whole year of content in Spanish, and they found out that 27.3% of our content done by DeepL is untouched by us as human linguists. 27.3% is untouched. It's raw MT, as they call it. And that actually gets published. And then there's another third or so that is almost untouched. So there's very light editing is necessary.
Okay.
And then there's another third that is often more heavily edited.
Okay.
Yeah.
So really 2/3 is relatively accurate. And then you're just having to kind of tweak some of the third left.
Right. And
average.
That's with a generic model. So there are opportunities still for us to get into custom or adapted machine translation models, which nice. We are looking into that as a next step. Then you're talking about, like training neural machine translation models. This is not large language models yet.
Sure.
That will be the next step after that. We're building very quickly at the moment. We are building our tech stack out very quickly, and that would be our next move to do something like that.
What about with the writing, the actual written language of other languages and stuff like that? How accurate is that going? I know obviously there's quite a few languages and cultures where the writing has not been implemented digitally yet. So I'm just kind of curious, with the 10 languages you're using, is it being represented accurately?
I guess I'm not sure what you mean with are you talking about low resource languages that might not have?
Yeah. I'm just kind of curious how the technology works with those, or does it work with them yet?
Right. Yeah. There's definitely limitations to the quality of machine translation, and often it's not even available, of course, for very low resource languages. But then for fairly common low resource languages, it's still not very good. There are the ones that we have, for instance, are Afrikaans and Hebrew, and we use translated as a company, and they have a modern MT, and that's better with that's the best one that we've seen with low resource languages, but there are other players, that's for sure.
Okay, all right. Is that something? Just complete side note again. Are you kind of trying to get into lower resource languages at some point, or are you kind of sticking with the 10 you have right now, or what?
Well, some of those 10 are they would be considered low resource languages, but there's definitely developments, even within the LLM world now, where they are working on, on those low resource languages, because what is clear from the research is that you give good high quality data to either a NMT or an LLM, and it will have good results. Like you have to put guardrails on all of that, but the results are definitely there when you are training it in a custom way. So that definitely is an exciting frontier for us to further explore. We are doing some tests with that, and I think almost everybody is. But who has linguistic assets like translation memories and glossaries and such, because that's what you need. You need the high quality data, as they say. Data is the oil of this the new oil.
Sure,
but it's high quality data. It's not just any data.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Okay, so really quickly, just in case there are some listening right now that are not entirely familiar with some of the different companies that you mentioned here, some of the technologies you mentioned, do just a quick little overview of like Blackbird, DeepL, all that, everything that you were just talking about. As far as I know, you were talking about where it goes and how it works and everything, but just in case somebody's saying, wait, so what does Blackbird exactly do? Just curious.
Mm-hmm. Right. So Blackbird is a workflow orchestrator. Okay. So you can basically create steps of your workflow in Blackbird. So you can put you can say, okay, I want to put a file in Dropbox, then I want to move that into through DeepL, and then I want to put it back into Dropbox so that it does that. So that's just a workflow orchestrator that is specialized for the localization industry.
Okay, and once that's inputted, then it's automated.
Yeah, and then it just runs automatically.
Excellent. Okay.
Now, you can also have manual triggers and such, but anyway, the point is that the steps are automated.
Excellent.
and then you've got DeepL, which is machine translation, or technically neural machine translation, and that is that has been around for a while now, for several years. And there's other players in the machine translation world. DeepL is just one of the big ones, and then you've got large language models, which is what everybody talks about when they, a lot of people will talk about AI, of course, nowadays, which I prefer not to use even the word AI necessarily, because it's so all encompassing of all of these various technologies. So LLM is actually only one part of AI, because you also have diffusion models, which is the imagery that you are seeing generated. That's part of AI in that sense, but it's not large language model, so it's actually different. And then you've got more than that, but then it gets more and more technical. So I don't want to get too technical necessarily, but there's a difference. There's a difference between all of these things.
Yeah.
And large language models are transformer models, and that's the big breakthrough. Then, of course, has been that exactly, where you have this generative AI, where you can all of a sudden have natural language used as a prompt in order to tell it what to do, either to generate text or an image, or even other things now like sound.
That's cool. It's such neat technology, all of these things, and just to go and just have a little fun and explore and test it out and play with it, and just get to learn it. But no, I appreciate you explaining what each of those did, just in case somebody's saying, wait, which one do I need to grab and what do I need right now? So thanks for the explanations on those. So now I understand that you've been told that you are strategically and tactically independent, which is awesome, by the way. But I got to hear the story behind that. Like, what have you done to get that? And now it's allowing you to build your own suite. So talk about that. Talk about the impact, all that.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So there's always a discussion between buying versus building, right? So you can buy tools, or you can build tools or put them together, and that's what we're doing right now. There are larger suites available on the market that are very, very good. In fact, we were in very close conversations, and I have a very high respect for these groups, and it is the right choice for many companies and many even non-profits, I imagine. So it's the right choice, because these companies are creating wonderful suites that have all these various components, and you can use it and so on. But it isn't as customizable as we would like, and they don't necessarily use the exact tools that we are already using or that we like to use. So when you make your own suite, as we could say, then you're more independent. You have more autonomy. You can choose more what tools you want to use. For instance, a good example of this would be our process management. We use Trello, and it is a Kanban style process management, which is what's really famous is how the car industry uses a Kanban style, where you have a product move basically on from list to list, or from step to step, from one side to the other, like in a car factory. And we have that organized on Trello. Now, that Trello Kanban style, that you can try to integrate that with some of these suites, but it is actually very, very easy with something like Blackbird. So we can just use that, and that's what we're working on. We're creating this layer of our process management with all of these steps. So what I earlier described with putting a file into the Dropbox, what it will also do then, once our microservice is completely built out, it'll also then trigger the creation of a project card on our Trello board automatically through Blackbird. And then it'll even select the correct template based on the file name. So we can we have a little file name builder. We make the little file name. We can actually eventually build that out into a portal ourselves, and then or even do that with Slack. And so nice. I'm not sure if most people probably are familiar with Slack. It's a messenger app, and you can even talk through Slack to Blackbird. You could even, for instance, you could say, on Slack you can have a channel and say, okay, drop this document in there, and then you can say, you can just add a little German flag and say, and then that can trigger the translation, and then you can add a few more pieces of information, and then it'll actually take that and follow the workflow that you've built for those parameters. And it creates this beautiful, almost magical system with exactly the tools that we like using. And so that's what makes us then strategically and tactically independent, because we're creating a workflow that we like using, and it works really well for us. And it's with exactly the tools that we want to use. So it's not some other product that somebody else built in the way that they thought was best.
Yeah.
It's specifically, essentially customized for us.
Yeah, that does make sense, because I feel like a lot of the systems out there are there's a steep learning curve, and then you've got to try to make it work into, like you said, your own style, and it's not necessarily designed for that. So that is a great idea with customizing a little bit more. I mean, let's be honest, everybody builds something that solves their own problem. And it usually solves a bunch of other people's problems too, but not always.
Yeah, absolutely. But also, as long as everybody cooperates, these components, then we have a low entry level financially as well. So if they say, okay, you only need this part of our product, and then that comes at this low price, and then that's it, and then we can use, and then we adopt them as a component because they have a good entry price, and we were able to use them. But so if the entry cost otherwise can be very high in certain cases otherwise, and so essentially we're building it much cheaper actually than what you would otherwise have to pay.
That's cool.
And again, it's customized. Now, it does take some effort, of course. You do need a good team. And thankfully, we do actually have a really awesome team and that has been really excited about all of this. And they've been helping. And it's also changing their roles. So they may have been, managers over a language, but then they also had some technical skills. So then I asked them, like, okay, can you help me build this LangOps language operation system with me? And then they were really excited about that. So there's been several people who have been really instrumental in that. And without them, there's no way that we could have built it. So you do have to have a few people who are excited about this and are willing to build this thing with you.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. I mean, it does come down to the right fit for all of that. And of course, the person leading the charge too, which it sounds like you're doing that. So that's awesome. Thanks so much for listening to the Native Experience podcast. Hope you're enjoying this episode with Edwin. We've got more amazing content, tips, tricks, advice, all kinds of great things on creating a native experience. Native Experience, the book, is out now. Our CEO, Mark Saba, is sharing the complete blueprint that we use here at Lexigo for effective and authentic engagement, all in one practical, cultural, insight-packed book. This book is perfect for marketers, communication professionals, business leaders, and anyone eager to connect deeply across languages and cultures. Go to lexigo.com/NX for more information and also to grab a copy for you of the book right now. All right, let's get back to our conversation with Edwin. What is, and I know this is going to vary based on different people, different companies and stuff, but what is an average learning process, adoption process for a company when they take on one of these systems?
Yeah, I guess that depends on where you are in your maturity as an organization. Like where are you as a company? So, a lot of companies, let's say startup, makes some sort of new special product that has AI in it,
Yeah.
But they might not be thinking about reaching an international world right away, perhaps. In fact, I was just talking to a company that's exactly like that. They're just building it English only. A lot of companies do that, and that's like kind of the lowest level of localization you can start at, because they're not localizing at all. They're just having it in English. So then, okay, how long does it take for them to start or to create a good localization system? Well, actually, that can take some time. And it depends on how difficult their or how complex their organization is. I think I saw that the other day that the architecture tends to reflect the complexity of the organization. Like a simple one has a simple organization and ends up with a simple system, but then complex ones have these monoliths, very complex. So those would take years. It takes years. Literally, it takes years to build systems like this. But we're at the moment, because we're fairly flexible. Actually, I've been told that we essentially operate like a startup in some ways, even though we're a larger organization. We move very quickly. So within a matter of a few months of doing some research and then adopting some of these technology, we're already building things that are making a direct impact. So it takes months if you're fast.
Yeah, very nice. Cool. Okay. Now, so this is kind of a little funny side note. I've seen companies use systems and process management to an extreme. And I mean, maybe it does work, but I feel like it creates more complication, more work, more time, that kind of thing. So how far is too far when it comes to this? I mean, obviously you want this to work for you, but it also needs to be effective and simple and not more complicated and, not add more time to it. So what's your advice on that?
Yeah, that's a really good point. That's always the balance, isn't it? Like you don't want to make it too complicated, and you don't want something that breaks all the time either. That's not good.
Yeah, for sure.
So you have to weigh it in the balance. You say, okay, this is how much this tool costs. This is how much it'll add theoretically, and then you have to test it. You have to experiment with that. And I think what's really important is measuring it, and starting small each time. So you have these really. So you have experiment. It's like experimentation should not be a dirty word. And it should not be something that like leadership discourages. I was talking to some fairly large, or people who work at some very large companies recently, and they said that they were experimenting kind of in secret because they felt like it would almost come across as if they don't know what they're doing, and therefore that would come up in their evaluation later on. Like, okay, well, I thought you knew what you were doing. Why are you experimenting? Like, as if that's a bad thing, you know? So I think that comes down to culture, like of your organization. Like, is it okay to experiment? Because that's really important. Because if you can't experiment or do experimentation, then how do you know if something is good to adopt or not? Because what if it's not good? So a vendor manager at a company maybe adopts something and you try it out, and actually pretty quickly you recognize that it's not good. Well, do you have the flexibility to say, okay, this isn't working? And then can we just say, okay, well, good try. Let's just get rid of it then.
Yeah.
or do we just stick with that just out of the, I don't know, the hardness of our heart and say, no, we're doing this thing.
Yeah.
That's not good. True. So you have to try small things, and then as small as possible, at least. And then be willing to just get rid of it again. That would be my advice, to make sure that you have a culture of experimentation.
I feel like experimentation is the only way to success, truthfully, because otherwise you're never going to know. And just because something's been done the way it has for 20 years or whatever, doesn't mean that it's the right way to do it now. There's experiment. I mean, think about even with just food. If somebody knows what they're doing with food, they're constantly experimenting. Why? Because there's always room to grow. There's always something new to try. There's always a better way to do something. And so as long as it's not, constantly in change, because I like what you said about taking small experiments one thing at a time, because there are those that they're always experimenting and they never stop and settle on something that actually works either, which means there's constant flux, and that doesn't always work either. But I love the idea where you have stability and room for growth and experimentation, one thing at a time. I love that. I think that's exactly the way that it should be.
Yeah, that's right. You have that. That's right. That's really good to remember, to have that stability. And then because if you change one thing, then you can measure it. Then it's more isolated. It's actually more scientific in nature, where you've isolated the change, and then you can see, okay, this is the impact of that change.
Yeah.
Because if you change everything or too much or too quickly, then you don't even know what actually made the real change.
That's true. I know you see that a lot with people's health. And it's so funny how people will say, well, I've got this issue right now, and they'll just go change so many things all at once. And then you go, well, wait, what was the problem or what worked? And, usually the best advice is change one thing at a time and measure it, because then you'll have more of the data on did this actually impact or not. And same thing with what you're just saying there, right there. So it's very true. Now, I am curious to know what led you to this point. So the fact that you were able to lead the charge on building this suite and, putting together a team, asking people to join you on this, just all of the knowledge you've learned, the experience you have up to this point. Any advice for companies as they are navigating all of this and saying, okay, we need to either use someone else's suite, or maybe we should consider building our own and customizing as necessary, but just any advice you have as companies are navigating all of this?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that you need to carve out time for this, rather than saying you kind of have to do it on the side. Like, I think that somebody has to, who is the right fit for this, of course. So somebody who's good at, somebody who understands the needs, the use cases, and then somebody who can have time for this, because you do need time. You need some freedom. So yeah, you have to find the right person for that. I've been around for quite a long time, so I understand the use cases very well, and I understand what we're trying to accomplish. And I was given the freedom to spend some time on it. Nice. It's always within reason, of course. You need to keep regular work going, but you need to have time. That's for sure. Because I say that, and because it sounds so simple, right? But I was talking to somebody the other day, and they said, well, nobody seems to have time for this kind of everybody, and this was a large company with something like 2,000 employees, I think he said. And they're all just kind of running around, like doing stuff, like constantly busy with the daily stuff, having their head down. And then again, like, it's almost like they're afraid to experiment, because then it ends up on their job review. It's just kind of sad, actually. So a lot of it has to come from it does come from the top. Like, the leadership does have to allow for this kind of thing. If you want to succeed, and we're talking about localization, right? Like, we're talking about language operations. So if you want to succeed at language operations, well, then you need to make sure that somebody who's really capable and competent at this, and maybe that has to be a senior person. Like, sometimes you need to, as a senior person, that person needs to actually do it, because otherwise maybe it won't work, because there's a lot of ramifications with all of this, including financial, staff, like division of labor, and so on and so on. So there are definitely a lot of ramifications. So you do need a lot of buy-in from leadership. Yeah, no, this is a really good point. I think I interviewed a CEO once. This was many years ago. Granted, everybody's doing different things, but he actually, and again, this is the lesson I've never forgotten, but he stressed the importance of sometimes just sitting in your office and staring at the wall and problem solving or solution finding or coming up with new ideas, or basically the ability to become creative with what could we do. But he said people would walk in there and just be staring at a wall, and people would think he wouldn't be doing anything. But the reality was he was doing a lot, and it took that time, like you said, to be able to come up with those solutions. But also, like you said, with language and localization too, is knowing what needs to be done, or sometimes stepping back, closing your mouth, and asking questions so that you can learn what needs to be done. Where are the problems? Where can we do better? And so, like you said, having a very good knowledge and experience within the industry itself, but then also having that time, like you said, to sit down and just kind of brainstorm. And, maybe it's scheduling that. I don't know what it would take,
But sometimes, creativity, you can't force creativity either. And sometimes it comes when you least expect it, and you need to be able to say, I need to take this time right now and figure this out right now, even though they've got all kinds of tasks to do, because tasks will never end.
Yeah,
I love that.
This reminds me of the Gemba walk concept. Have you ever heard of that? The Gemba walk?
I don't think so.
It's something that where the like in let's say a Toyota, like a car manufacturer, they'll have the senior folks. They'll walk the floor of the manufacturing floor, and then they consider the workers on that line knowledge workers, and they're allowed to even pull what's called an anden cord. So there's literally a cord that's hanging above them. They can pull that. Originally, it would stop the entire factory, like the line would stop, and then the problem would be resolved after pulling that line. Now that it's more optimized, where like either a part, only part of it stops, or just the light goes on, and then a manager goes over there and then checks what happened. But they thank them. They say thank you for pulling the cord. This is like what, and they can pull the cord for just about anything, like any kind of area of improvement or maybe a problem. And then on the Gemba walk, this is a separate concept technically, where the Gemba walk is they walk around and they look around and see how things are going, and that's when you see the real truth of what the problems are and what the use cases are. And when you do that, then if you have that flow of information from top to bottom and bottom to top, then you've got a real education within your company, and then you can really improve from there with like armed with the right knowledge, instead of actually just sitting in your office. Like it is good to sit in your office and think, but in addition to that, you need to get out of your office and actually walk around and see what's really going on the floor.
Absolutely. No, and that was kind of the second part of that, is having a pulse on knowing what actually needs. Well, so back in the day, I used to joke about this because when I was doing radio in my youth, I'd say, okay, I got to have a pulse on what people are listening to and what they're wanting. And we need to be able to deliver that. And a lot of it would be just sitting around and researching new bands and new music and artists and trying to figure out what people might like, but also getting a pulse on what they already are listening to, what they're wanting, what they're craving, and what we're not already giving them. So yeah, exactly. That process where there is the brainstorming and the creativity side of things, but then there is you need to know what's going on. And you don't see that enough too, where you see, the management teams, for example, I would say a lot of times have no idea what's going on, like you said, with the knowledge workers or on the floor or whatever. They don't have that hands-on experience. And so the ones that are getting their hands, proverbially, or I would say even literally dirty at times, getting their hands dirty and getting out and understanding, those are the ones that are going to have a pulse on what's actually going on, as well as the brainstorming too. So yeah, that was kind of the idea behind it, but I love it. I love what you're saying here, and this is good stuff. So appreciate the advice. And yeah, thank you so much for sharing all of these, what you're doing, the new strategies, the new systems, the processes. I mean, all of this. This is really, really cool. This workflow is neat. I love this stuff. I don't know it as well as you do, but I've got a friend who actually nerds out on this stuff for, in other ways, but he tells me, very similar to what you were describing in the beginning of the episode, he'll tell me all of these automated processes, and I'm just like, this is so cool. I mean, this is really, really helpful right now. And it really does eliminate so much busy work. And so when you're talking about saving in your organization, 40 average hours a week, which allows an entire full-time job to be trained in another area that creates more production, more outgo everything. It's like that is incredible stuff. So I appreciate this.
And it of course is more meaningful for that person to, instead of like clicking around all day long, click, click, click. It's very boring, you know. So, but it needs to be done, so that they have a job for that. But now they can do work that is more creative. It's more interesting, you know. Like they're doing like they'll probably do like DTP, like desktop publishing type work, and instead of like clicking around all day long. So it just provides more opportunities actually to for more enjoyable and meaningful work,
and greater impact too. And I think that's you're putting out more content this way. You're able to translate faster and more effectively. And, you know, I think about in the world of content creation, we're doing this podcast here. There's still so much behind the scenes that happens with the podcast. I mean, it's a crazy amount of work that goes into a podcast. So many people, I'll talk to people. Yeah, I want to start my own podcast. They don't have a clue. They have no idea how much time it's going to take, how much work it's going to take. And automated tools are starting to work now. They're starting to actually make it easier to do podcasting, but it's still not quite there yet. But I keep thinking more and more that if they could just solve some of these, like you said, button clicking and a lot of just kind of that stuff in the background, if they could solve some of those problems, it would allow us to put out even more and more content and more impactful content, because you're focusing more on the content and less on the back end stuff. And that's, you know, just going along with what you're doing right now too. It's just allowing you to focus on the actual creation and the impact of what you're doing, which is great. I mean, that's what it's supposed to be.
Yeah,
I love it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's the right use of technology, and it creates more opportunities. And you don't have to wait around. Like there's another one that we did, microservice we didn't talk about, but it's a transcription microservice where you go from you take an audio file such as a podcast, and then you transcribe it. Our system will classify the size of that. So there's two tools that we use. And then we can use a tool called Transcriptor, or we can use OpenAI's Whisper based on file, and then we can add timestamps if we want. We can say that ahead of time. We can also add speaker diarization, which is you might know what that means, but I'll say what it means for other people.
Yeah.
But it's when there's two speakers, like in an interview, and then in the transcript it's denoted speaker one, speaker two, speaker one, speaker two. That's called speaker diarization.
Yeah.
And you can add that now also automatically through these transcription services.
It's
so
great.
You just in our microservice in our Dropbox, we drop in the file, and then it does it. Based off the file name that we've created, and it does it exactly the way we like.
Oh, that's so cool. I mean, honestly, you're because just what you're talking about right there. That's the kind of stuff that typically we've had to manually do all of that. And when you think about transcription back in the day, I mean, I remember hiring somebody to literally sit there, listen to an episode, and type everything out. And oh my gosh, I mean, nowadays it's significantly faster and more simple, but at the same time, doesn't always get it right, but it does a really nice job now. And I'm glad you brought up the speaker diarization and stuff like that too, because there's so much customization with that, even so that when somebody's reading through what you're talking about, they're right there with you and they know exactly who's talking, what they're saying. And it's great. Yep. It's phenomenal technology actually. And I've used a service, a different one, but did a lot of that same stuff for podcasting as well. It's cool. I mean, I got to be honest. But I get overwhelmed sometimes too, because I think even with like shorts, shorts are huge right now in content, and so a lot of people are doing long form videos, and then they're using technology to split it out into various different forms of media. So there were a couple, I think, when this got started, where they would take your video and they would chop it up and put it into a vertical format, like on your phone, so that it could go on a short or a TikTok or something like that. And it was doing that all automated, and it was great. And it would it was pretty accurate. You had to go in and definitely edit a few things, or you'd throw out a certain clip. But I mean, now there's a ton of them doing it. So it's fun to watch all the new technology coming out. And like you said, with 2,000 different options with Nimsies, you go, oh my gosh, where do I start? But it's there, and that's what's neat. But at the same time, the customization, I actually think there's a very large opportunity right now for customization like you're talking about, because the one size fits all doesn't always work. And it does for some, but I think the customization market is wide open right now because it's so new. So that's cool. That's cool that you're doing that. Edwin, thank you. I appreciate this.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. It's good to talk to you. It was good to talk to you last time, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you again.
Oh, likewise. It was great. Yeah, we had more of a philosophical discussion, I think, last time, but this one really got into the details of what you're doing, and I love this. And I always love hearing about the impact too, because that's, bottom line, people are going to ask, well, how is this going to help me? What's in it for me? And what's in it for my, whoever it is you're serving, your listener, your customer, your client, whatever. And I love that. So, or your reader in your case. So I love this. Thank you. Well, hey, let me know if you've got more coming up and we'll get you back on the show. But again, appreciate your time and thanks for joining me.
All right. Thanks, Brian. Thanks for having me again.
Edwin Trebels, Translations Director at Philadelphia Church of God. My name is Brian. Thanks so much for joining us. Welcome back. Oh my gosh, what a fun episode. So much cool stuff to nerd out on. Hope you got some great value out of that. We'd love to hear from you. nx@lexigo.com is the email. Send us any questions and comments. Thanks for joining us. Remember to always strive for authenticity and embrace the power of native experiences.